On this episode of Still Loading, I gotta say, I'm losing the plot here. Hello everyone, and welcome to this new episode of Still Loading. For this week's episode, we are diving back into the Naughty Dog series that I've been doing. We've been alternating between James Bond games and Naughty Dog games, and we're back with another Naughty Dog game. And this time, since we did Uncharted 1 and 2, we figured let's keep on moving on to Uncharted 3. And with me, as with the others, is Tristan.
What's up, my dudes?
So, Uncharted 3. What can we say about it? This game I think for me personally, this was the first time I was cognizant of a release that I was legitimately hyped for. I literally had a countdown on my Facebook. Do you remember that? I would literally, no one knew what it was. I would just say 25 days, and that's all I would write on my Facebook. And then, of course, it got to the day. It was the midnight release. We both went to GameStop, and they didn't have a midnight release.
We roll up the GameStop at midnight, and we're like, they're closed. What?
Apparently, we didn't know at the time that it wasn't based off of games. It was based off of number of pre-orders for a specific game. So it could be like the shittiest game in the world or something that no one would care about. But if it has enough pre-orders, they're going to have a midnight release for it. And Uncharted 3, we were like, it's got to be. It's Uncharted. It's like one of the most unpopular. It's
least popular game ever.
One of the most popular game series of all time. It's got to be. And we got to GameStop and there was nothing. You know what? In retrospect, that should have given us a hint for how this game was going to treat us. I guess kind of to go out the gate is it's still a good game, but it's nowhere near as good as pretty much almost all the others in the series, I would say. I would even say the Vita one is more fun than this.
So I didn't beat the Vita one, mostly because I wasn't super into the using the tiny joysticks on the Vita for like a third person shooter. I plan to go back to it at some point. It just I got through like 2 chapters and was like, my aim kind of is shit, and I don't feel as powerful as I do in like the console ones. So.
I could agree with that actually.
But yeah, I mean, Uncharted 3 famously got a 10 out of 10 on IGN.
Did it?
It did.
Did it really?
Greg Miller gave it the masterpiece rating. When Uncharted 2, who I don't think it was Greg that reviewed that one. It was one of the other PlayStation guys. Gave Uncharted 2 like a 9.5. And that was like a real big sticking point for a lot of people, myself included, for like years. Because it was like, listen, Uncharted 3 is good. But like Uncharted 2 is like
so much better.
Yeah.
On a lot of different levels.
And what Greg would always say is that if Uncharted 3, like the third game, was actually the second game, and came out before Uncharted 2 did, then everyone would be like, oh, well, then 3, that would then be 2, is clearly the better one. And I just don't see how that's... I think objectively speaking, there are problems. There are more problems with this game than there are problems with Uncharted 2. For sure.
I guess to dive right into it, like... we'll talk about the story, but that's kind of that's going to be a long-winded type of thing. But my biggest issue with the game is actually the camera. I actually think the camera, because it's still similar controls, but I found myself fighting these controls a lot more than I was in Uncharted 1 or 2. And, we just played them recently. This isn't like recency bias. It's not like, or it's not even nostalgia bias. Like, I remember the great controls of Uncharted. Like, we just played it a couple months ago. Like, it's fresh in our minds. And when I was playing through Uncharted 3 again, I mean, I didn't get around to beating it again, but I got you saw me when I was playing before we started recording. I was about halfway.
2/3 maybe?
Okay, about 2/3. Oh, even farther than halfway.
Yeah, because you got through most of like the story stuff, and it was just all kind of.
Yeah.
I think that last third goes a lot quicker because so it might even be half the game, but it feels like a third.
So the main issue that I have with it, the main issue that I have with the controls is, like I said, the camera, and it just feels like you're constantly fighting it. Like you can't ever get a good sense of, like, you always either are overstepping or you over rotate the camera. It just feels a little bit too floaty. And also, even the way Drake controls, I found myself constantly trying to get the right angle, and it was impossible because you would just tilt the joystick slightly and he would just like lunge all over the place. And I actually think I have a reason, or I have some logic as to why I think the cameras don't work in this. And it's because they tried to be more cinematic in this game. I noticed a lot of times they tried really unique camera angles, and it breaks up the issue with that. It's not that that's a problem, but they do it so frequently that it breaks up the consistency of your controls. So you're constantly having to readjust to a new camera angle, and Drake plays based off the camera angle, not off of his natural direction, which is fine. I would prefer that, because if you're going to switch camera angles, because I hate games that, like, if the camera's not right behind the character and you're basing all the controls off of the direction the actual character model is facing, it'd be like, if the character's facing right and you hit forward, then he's going to keep going to the right on the screen because he's facing right. But if you hit left, then he goes up the screen. You know what I mean? I'm glad they don't do stuff like that. But there's so many moments in the game where it would have been really nice to be able to just control the camera a little bit more yourself. There's a lot of times where they took the control of the camera away from you, and you could, like, make it pan left and pan right just a little bit, but it would always, jut back to the spot where they wanted it to be. And it was just so infuriating, and they kept doing it over and over and over again. It drove me nuts.
Now, in those situations, could you still aim?
Generally, when they had those situations, it was more of a platforming type of section.
Okay.
So they at least designed it around that, so that way you wouldn't be in combat with those weird camera angles. But at the same time, the platforming section, if I'm fighting the controls with Drake and then you're also changing the camera on me, it doesn't work really well. I'm trying to think specifically. There's a couple moments. What was the one that I just had recently? I think I was doing one of the puzzles. I think it was like the gear puzzle or whatever, and it didn't mess me up too much, but like it kept switching the camera angle because it had to for the puzzle, which is fine. And if it was just that moment, I would have been okay. But that was like the 30th time in the game that I've had that. There's just so many moments where I just found myself fighting the controls, trying to, like, get Drake to do what I wanted him to do. And like I said, I would think, like, okay, maybe am I just not as good as I remember that I used to be? But I just played Uncharted 2 like a month or two ago, and it was fine. Didn't have any complaints of the controls in that.
Yeah, for sure. As soon as I started playing Uncharted 3 back in, what was that, 2011, I immediately noticed, not necessarily that it might have, looking back on it, it might have been like a camera issue that I just wasn't, like, cognizant of.
Yeah.
But, like, for sure, my aim was not right. And, like, not to, like, toot my own horn, but I thought I was, like, really good at Uncharted 2. Like, we would be playing...
I mean, you beat it on crushing.
Yeah. But, I mean, like, we'd be playing co-op, and we'd just be, like, wrecking shop. And it was just like, this is amazing, and I love it. And as soon as I started playing Uncharted 3, it was like something was just a little bit off. Like, I could not land a headshot, and it was like, it was infuriating for me. And, like, I was reading online that, like, a lot of other people were having the same issue. And I remember Naughty Dog was like, listen, guys, like, nothing changed. Like, the aiming is exactly the same as Uncharted 2. So, like, must be an issue on your guys' end. I don't know. And then, like, a couple months later, they're like, hey, we're putting out a patch that, like, I don't know, fixes the aiming. And it was, like, a little bit better, but, like, still not quite there.
I actually think that I almost wonder if it's a combo of I don't know. Maybe it's exactly the same, but I actually feel like maybe the reason it was a little bit tougher is because of the way they designed the enemy encounters in this. The enemy encounters in this are brutal. Like, they are tough in Uncharted 3. Specifically, remember at the end where you're fighting the djinns? Like, that's a tough segment. Like that's a really hard section.
Yeah, for sure.
And I remember getting more frustrated in Uncharted 3 than I ever was in Uncharted 1 and 2.
Yeah, Uncharted 3 definitely has like a lot of like kind of cheap aspects to it.
Yes.
More towards the end. But like even at the beginning when there's like regular guys that are just running up to you and I was still missing headshots.
Well, and just in the section that I was playing before we started recording, like you're hiding behind cover like you should do to protect yourself. You take out one guy, but 3 guys converge on you at the same time, and you can't take all of them out at once. And the 2 of them have shotguns, and that's usually a 1-hit kill.
Right.
But then you shoot them in the face, and it's not a 1-hit kill. And it's absolutely, there's a lot of balance issues with the combat in this game. I feel like Uncharted 2, I think there were still sections where they threw a lot of enemies at you, but it never got to the point where you felt overwhelmed, even if there was a ton on screen. In this, you feel overwhelmed very quickly because they just close in on you super fast.
Right. And it's one of those things where even if you're playing on normal, like you were
I was just on normal
a while ago, it's still like, why is this so difficult? Like it's normal and we're all like pretty good at the game.
We're all just, I mean, we've been playing games for most of our lives now at this point, so
right,
we should be good at games in general.
So, like, it should be a little bit of a challenge, but, like, not really, though, right? Like, we shouldn't be dying all the time. Whereas, you know, like, if you're playing on Crushing, then you kind of expect it to be, like, that brutal, and then it's like, all right, it's fine if I die in, like, 2 bullets, because I'm playing on Crushing.
You know
Right.
it's going to be difficult.
So you're in that like correct mindset, and it's just the difficulty curve didn't quite match up with the actual difficulty that it said you were on screen.
I would almost argue my issue with it is that the deaths don't feel like they're your fault. I have no issue when you mess up in a game and it's your fault and that's why you died. When the game itself is kind of putting cheat codes on, that's when, for lack of a better term, that's what I'm not okay with. That's when I don't like it. It's not fun when you feel like you were cheated out of a scenario versus like perfect example in the same scenario we're just talking about, because in the scenario that we're talking about, we're coming out of a tomb or kind of like this like secret, like not even a tomb. It was like a secret like shrine
like
type
a temple
of thing.
type thing.
It was a temple. And we get back to the entrance, and when you go in, then there's a lot of chest-high walls conveniently from fallen, like pillars and stuff like that. So it makes sense there's going to be a fight in here. You kind of know it's coming. And I was hiding behind when we got back out there, I was hiding behind cover, and as you saw, there was like 2 shoddy guys that converged on me at the same time. That was a big brute, I think, right?
Yeah.
So it was a giant brute and 2 shotties, and the brute you can't really like. If you shoot at him, bullets don't stop him. He'll still run and punch you. So you have to get into a fist fight with him. And in the meantime, while that's happening, the shotgun guys are just shooting away at you. So you literally get stuck in the animation for the fight that you're forced into while you're getting shot by shotgun guys. That's bullshit. Like that's not fair. You can't be tactical when you're not given it. You don't have any options.
I mean, that's like on par with the frustration from like the early Assassin's Creed games when you're trying to fight a guy, but you're like stuck on a wall, and you're like, I want to attack that guy, and you jump to a different wall, and the whole time they're like murdering you. It's just like.
And then in that same room, just like I said, I have no issue if I messed up. Remember, I ran out from behind the pillar to try to be a little bit more aggressive and take out a guy early, and I just got blown to pieces because there was like 6 guys standing around it. That was my fault because I know I was safe by that cover, and I knew there was going to be enemies out there, but I was taking a risk.
Yeah.
That I'm 100% okay with. I was dumb and I died, but that's because I made the decision and I fucked up. Versus getting forced into a situation where there's literally, it's a Kobayashi Maru. You're just, the unwinnable situation. I don't know. There's a lot of issues that I had with the controls and the combat balance. That was like, I know we're kind of starting off with all the negative stuff. We'll get into the good stuff. There is stuff that I don't know about you, but there's a lot of stuff I did really like about this game.
Yeah, not to totally shuttle over the game because it's still like one of my favorite games, but just in context to the other Uncharted games, it's like much lower on the list.
And it's like compared to like, make no mistake, this is a good game. There's just problems with it. Like you're gonna find you'll still find yourself enjoying it, playing it. It's just that enjoying yourself while playing it, but There's certain elements, man. The other thing that oh my gosh, what was the one thing that I wanted to bring up? We can use this as also as like a totally professional segue into talking about the graphics, which is actually one of the highlights. But the issue that I have with the graphics is that they're not consistent. There's some times where Drake's face is just, there's no texture to it. It's just like this Caucasian mush that's like all over. And then other times, like in the last cutscene we were just watching before the fight that I kept dying in, it looked great. Like everyone, but then like Drake looked super detailed, but Elena looked almost like a porcelain doll. Weird, right?
Yeah, and I noticed, so I've been watching a gameplay beforehand to kind of take notes to refresh my memory a bit.
Yeah.
And that same spot where Elena was talking to you, that must be, because it looks more in-game rendered rather than like pre-rendered. And I could definitely notice differences between what I was watching on yours and what was on that YouTube video. Because like Elena's eyes and yours look totally normal, like properly like shiny and good looking.
Yeah.
In his, they were like really blurry, like almost she had cataracts or something. So like that might just be an issue where like maybe
it didn't render properly.
Right, where somebody's like PS3 is like a little hotter than someone else's, so it's like running a little bit slower. And
I don't know, but that's
I honestly, that might even be...
I noticed that numerous times though throughout the game, not just in that scene. Like there's moments where the graphics just lose consistency.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm wondering, even if we go back to the control issue that I'm complaining about, maybe that's just part of the, like, they were really pushing the boundaries of the graphics on the PS3, and maybe they just like overtaxed it a little bit, and there was like a little bit of slowdown when it came to the controls.
I don't know,
man.
I mean, I don't know tech stuff, I guess, in that aspect. It could equally not be. Who knows?
Yeah. Totally conjecture on my part.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to put a reasoning to it.
I guess before we move on to the stuff we like, because we did start off, like, came out the gates hot with all the shit that we didn't like, but is there anything that you wanted to bring up that, like, you weren't particularly a fan of? We will talk about the issues with the plot once we get to the plot, because the plot, I would say, is the last, like, big problem I have with this game, but I figured we'd talk about the technical stuff, like, in terms of gameplay and whatnot.
Yeah, I think that kind of covers all of the technical issues for me. And as far as the story goes, playing it that first time when it first came out, I really kind of hated it. But after, I've played through it probably 4 or 5 times at this point. And looking back with all the knowledge of how the whole game pans out and paying like really close attention to all the cutscenes and stuff, it all kind of holds up a lot better if you kind of already know everything you need to know. It's just one of those games where the first time you go through it, if you just like, I don't know, get a little bit distracted in the middle of one of the cutscenes, then you're just like, have no idea anything that's happening.
The plot just like gets thrown out.
Right. Which is why it's so nice that one scene about halfway through the game when Sully says, "I gotta say, I'm losing the plot here." And it was just like, thank you, Sullivan.
Do you almost feel like that was like the writer's thing, like the writer's like subtle jab at like the director, like, because the director probably like created the story for it and the writers had to kind of fill it in?
I really like to think that was the case. That it's like, because Sully's kind of the, what's the word?
He's the foil for Drake, right?
Well, he's like the person that's kind of representing the player and the audience.
Yeah, like, you're right.
Because, Drake and Cutter, they'll be, like, talking about stuff. They're like, oh, yeah, we understand all this conspiracy theories.
It's always like, hold on now.
Right, and it's always like, guys, I don't know what's happening. Can you, like, please explain it
I just
to
want
all
money.
Of us? Yeah. So I don't know. That might even be, like, a credit to the story, is that they used Sully as that kind of tool to kind of...
I mean, well, they've used him as that even since, like, the Uncharted 1 and 2. Like, they do stuff like that. No, I guess what I want to talk. I guess we can start talking about some of the stuff we like. We will jump into the plot in a little bit. I was going to actually say, like, I was criticizing the graphics just a little bit ago. I actually really think the graphics are really nice in this, specifically the attention to detail and like every place you go, like all the the marketplaces you go to feel so vibrant and lifelike. some of the anti-aliasing is a little off. And that when I was replaying it, it was like, ooh, there's like shiny like white edges around a lot of these guys, and it just kind of like it makes it hard to like look at. Not hard as in like, oh, that like, oh, it's so bad looking I can't look at it. It's literally like hard to decipher what's happening.
Yeah.
But other than that, I actually really liked the whole art style of it. I thought that was really good. I like the one thing, and I think you even mentioned it when the game came out, the lighting in this game is stunning. All the lighting stuff, and specifically, I think you pointed this out to me as well. When you play as young Drake in the beginning of the game, and you have the journal, if you open the journal up when you're standing in front of a window, you'll see the light from the window on it. But when you open it up in the shadow, then it's the actual shadow. Like and it's completely reactive. Like it's just that when you hit select, it will literally just take the camera, and Drake will animate himself picking out the journal and going on, like opening it up and going to the page. So it's almost like an internal cutscene, but that it's gameplay. I don't know. It's a really cool idea. So it's not, in other games, all they would do is that you would hit select and it would just jump to like a picture of like the hand of the book, and then like Drake's hand with the book over top of it. But this is actually rendered live in game. So like if you keep on that screen, you'll actually see shadows of the people walking by if you're in the marketplace, or like Elena or Sully walking by, because it's rendered in real time.
So now my one, again, I didn't play it the most recently, so I can't tell you for sure, but I feel like I remember, as cool as that was, that it's reactive like that, I kind of remember it being like that shadow is still rendered as though you're looking at the full room. So it's like a zoomed in kind of like low res version of the shadow. But then the book is in like high res. Right. So it's like a really nice book, and then you kind of have that like jaggy, weird looking shadow on there.
Yeah, it does have that a little bit.
So it's like good effort. I appreciate the try, but like
it still looks pretty good though. Like I don't think it takes away from it by any stretch, but I understand what you're saying. In general, I just thought it was like a good looking game. I thought all the characters looked pretty good when the game isn't glitching out on the graphics and only rendering like half of the textures. And Elena just looks like Sully's hair consistently just looks like it's like a Lego toupee. It looks like a solid sheet of gray. It doesn't look like it has any texture to its hair. It's just solid gray. So it has some problems. Do you have anything? What did you like about the graphics? Is there anything that you can think of that comes to mind with it?
Oh gosh, nothing super in particular. I mean, I guess the fire, the lighting effects with the fire were always good.
That was the other. When I was playing in the shrine or whatever, like the fire effects in general, and the particle effects in general, Uncharted have always been really good.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look back at Uncharted 2, one of those like big kind of realization moments for me is when he lights the torch in that like tomb in Borneo, and it's a blue torch, and he's walking around with and that like lighting was really cool. You have a lot of that in this, but you're right, they definitely upped the particle effects because it's much more important to the gameplay, like when you're trying to stave off the spiders and stuff that are coming at you.
The spiders, man. They're creepy as hell.
Which, I mean, I'll get to that. I got a lot of issues with the spiders. But.
Okay. They're just in thinking of the lighting effects or just particle effects. That was always a big thing for them in all of them. Like the first Uncharted game, they focused a lot on the water. Second one, they focused a lot on snow. And the third one, they focused a lot on sand. Hence why you're in the desert for a chunk of it. You get lost in the desert for a chunk of it. Actually, I might not be halfway through the game now that I think about it. I haven't even got into the capsized ocean liner yet.
Oh, that's a good point. There's a lot of action there. I'm probably halfway through the game, maybe a little less. Anyway, so I'd say you're like 2/3 through the important story beats.
Yes,
but the actual game you're probably coming up on halfway.
Let's dive into the story now. I think this is a good enough jumping off point as any. So, the premise of this game, or the story of this game, basically has Nathan Drake, the adventurer that we all know and love from the previous games, and he is trying to find the Atlantis of the Sands, or Ubar. I think it's called Ubar, right? Or the Aram of the Pillars is another. I think Ubar was another name for it, and it's
City of Brass.
The City of Brass. That's an awesome name too.
Mm.
It's this legendary city that was swallowed up by the desert in one night, and it's actually like a real like it's actual folklore. Like you can look it up. It's when they say the Atlantis of the Sands, it's literally like Atlantis, but instead of being swallowed by the ocean, it was swallowed by the desert. And it's all about him trying to find this city. That's it in a very condensed nutshell.
Right.
His motivations for this still are very unclear as to why he gives a shit about this city.
Right.
You get the idea that because you find out in the fourth game, spoiler, that he's not actually a relative of Francis Drake, correct? I'm correct and remember that,
Correct.
right?
That was after they had left the orphanage and were like, we have I don't know, a clue or something onto Sir Francis Drake, and like it was like the cops are after us or whatever. So it's like, we'll just change our names and we'll be Drakes from now on, because like that's we're greatness from small beginnings. We might as well be Drakes. So
Yeah,
that's our name now.
So he's obsessed with finding this because he doesn't know it's Atlantis of the Sands at the beginning of the game, but basically he's obsessed with this thing because he gets Drake's ring from a museum. It actually has a whole flashback level. He gets Drake's museum ring. His museum ring. Yeah, his Drake's ring from a museum, as well as what is it called? Do you remember what the little like thing is called?
Yeah,
it's like a gold circle,
they
and he
used a word for it. Sully called it something, and then Nate said, actually, it's not whatever that thing you said. It's like some sort of decoder ring, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of like you put. I'm gonna see if I don't think I'll be able to even be able to find it. But you put Francis Drake's ring inside the center of this, and it basically unlocks the decoder, so that way you can look at the clues left by Drake and then use it to decipher it.
It is a literal decoder ring.
Yeah, pretty much.
He has had around his neck for 2.5 games now.
Yep. And he's trying. He knew it would do something like that though, because when he was a kid, he was able to get it. And so for some reason, this game, the whole premise of it is that he wants to actually solve what like Sir Francis Drake did, because the whole kind of thing of it was when he came back from he went on a trip, I think directed by the Queen to go on a trip, and he said he took him 6 months to sail through this one portion of land, like this one portion of ocean, which was like kind of like whittling its way through islands and stuff like that.
The East Indies.
It was the East Indies, okay. And Drake says, no, Drake was... Nathan Drake says Sir Francis Drake.
Right.
This is so confusing. Says he was way too good of a sailor to take 6 months to do that. That would have taken him like what?
1
he
month.
said like 1 month tops. So what did he do for 5 months in there? Like what did he do for an extra 5 months? Basically, they kind of speculate that, or they kind of like do the historical fiction thing where he was actually looking for this Atlantis of the Sands.
Right. So you want to go just kind of like beat by beat as the story kind of
let's
progresses?
do that.
So it opens up. They are in London, presumably some English city.
No, it's London. You're right.
Okay. So it's Drake and Sully. And they're going into a pub to meet with this mysterious guy who wants to buy Drake's ring. And there's like, I don't know, millions of dollars or something, British pounds in a briefcase, and they go, "Hey, wait a minute, this is fake money. What are you trying to pull? This is bullshit, and we're out of here with our ring." And it devolves into a big like pub brawl type thing. And
that's where the game uses it to show off its hand-to-hand combat system, which is actually pretty good. I actually like the hand-to-hand combat system in this game.
Yeah, they introduce a lot of the kind of like environmental stuff where you can like smash a guy's head on a toilet if you're nearby, or like throw him into a mirror, that kind of stuff.
I thought that was really clever because it gave you it was an organic way to make the fights different every time. It wasn't just different because you're punching them at a different interval, or or they came up at a different spot. Like if you shove them to the counter where there's glass bottles, Drake would actually like pin him down and then take the glass bottle and beat him over the head with it.
Yeah, out in like on top of the bar and everything. Yeah. And they also introduced the like I think you called them the brutes, the really big guys that are a real pain in the ass to fight, but like kind of cool if it's just like you and them, because then you gotta
mano.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're doing that stuff, and you eventually, I think you end up out in the alley, and the guy Cutter, who you had been brawling with, has you like knocked down on the floor, and you meet Marlo.
When I first saw her, like in the game, I thought she was a great villain when I first played it. Playing it again, she's not that interesting of a villain.
I feel a lot of the issues with her is that she's like too mysterious, and it's never really like fully explained.
Well, they did explain. So basically, they said that Francis Drake was part of like this secret order that was kind of, I forget, I think John Dee was the head of like the Queen's like secret service type of thing.
Yeah.
And he would always sign his things 007, which is kind of where it came from.
I got notes. We're a couple lines away from all this info.
Okay, well, what I was going to say was the reason she's interested in it is because she's still part of that secret society just millennia later. That's why she's interested in this, because the secret society sent Francis Drake on the mission to do what he did, and he hid it all for years. And it wasn't until it just so happened to converge that they figured it out at the same time that Drake was just interested in Francis Drake. It's too many. Nathan Drake, it just happened that they figured out what they needed to do when Nathan Drake figured out or got an interest in Sir Francis Drake and stole the ring, and that's why it got hung up there for years.
Right. So we meet Marlo, and she's all like has her little umbrella knife.
Kind of looks like Helen Mirren.
Totally, absolutely, looks just like her, which is cool, I guess. But and she's like, "Oh, Drake, you don't fear death. You get off on this, whatever." And then it goes in flashbacks.
Good voice acting performance.
Yeah,
very good voice acting performance, and I actually don't mind the writing. Just like you said, there's nothing behind the mysteriousness. It's like being mysterious for the sake of being mysterious. Go on though.
And she's like, "Yeah, you're just the same little gutter rat that you've always been," or something along those lines. And then you flash back to like, I don't know, was it like 20 years?
Well, sort of. Cutter shoots them.
Right. Oh, you're right. That's
Cutter
how
shoots them, and you're like, and then you find out. I guess the whole thing's spoilers. So just spoilers for those who haven't played it. After the flashback, which we will still talk about the flashback, you find out that Cutter was actually part of like in on the whole thing with you and helping you out. But anyway,
and believe it or not, since there's an Uncharted, and the rest of this game and Uncharted 4, Drake and Sully are not dead. He did not actually shoot them.
Go figure, right?
Yeah. So anyway, we get our flashback to 20 or so years ago. Nathan Drake is a kid. He is out in some country that
it's South America. I don't remember exact. I actually they have it like in the beginning on the opening cutscene. They actually like tell you which countries each of the locations are at. Keep going though. I'll look it up quick.
Okay. And so he's going into this small museum that's like a, I don't know, nautical museum or something, that has a bunch of artifacts from Sir Francis Drake, including the ring and the decoder gold ring thingy, and some like maps and stuff. It was a pretty cool little area. But it's there that Nate notices.
It was in Cartagena, Colombia. I don't know if I'm saying, or it's Cartagena, but I'm sure that's not how you actually pronounce it. That's like the American version to pronounce it. Yeah. I was just assuming Cartagena. I don't know. And it's in Colombia.
I can envision how it's spelled in my head, but I couldn't pronounce it.
It's spelled Cartagena, like Gena. Like if you're spelling, like speaking it phonetically, Cartagena, but there's no way it's Cartagena.
Cartagena.
Maybe. I could see Cartagena.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
I don't know. Cartagena.
Okay. So while Nate is observing all this stuff and kind of casing the joint, he notices that Sullivan, young Sullivan, handsome devil that he is,
still old but younger.
Yeah, he's like maybe late 30s. He's still got some color in his hair.
Yeah, I would say late 30s, early 40s is a good guess on that one.
He's a good-looking guy. I was like, hey, look, it's like Sullivan back in his prime. Right on, buddy. But he's over there with a little, what do you call it, like a bump key?
He pretty much has like a mold that he like jams into the lock so that way he can make a mold of the key.
Right. So you like
Drake follows him to the key maker, then like pickpockets him to get the key out so he can go back to the museum later.
Right. And it's super cool because like Sully catches him pickpocketing him and he like tracks him down and he's like, all right, give me back my wallet. And Nate's like, gosh, mister, I had to try. Here's your wallet back. And he like prances off into the sunset, and Sully's just like totally over his head that he actually took his wallet to get his keys.
Yeah.
So then it's that night, and as little Nate, you got to break into the museum, and armed with your fancy new key, you unlock the glass case, and you grab the ring and the decoder thing. Unfortunately, Sully did notice that you took the ring, and he was working for Marlowe. So now you see young Marlowe, which is also really cool if you compare the models of the two, because it's like totally the same person.
Yeah.
But I feel like in the older versions in this game, they like did a pretty good job with kind of like the wrinkles around the eyes, and they're like a little bit like that kind of, I don't know if that's at like the hood of the eye, like between your eyeball and your eyebrow. That like little bit can kind of like sag a little bit with age.
Yeah.
And they definitely included that in the old Marlowe.
You're right, they did.
So it makes the faces look like a little bit spongy, which I didn't like at the time, but looking back at it, it's like, oh, okay, like
I see what you're going for.
Yeah, it's like more realistic aging effect. So cool. So they're able to get the decoder ring from him, but not by decoder ring, I mean the gold thing.
Yeah,
that you put the ring into.
Yeah, whatever it's called.
Right, and then the actual ring, Nate makes off with. And a really interesting thing happens here, where you have all these games where he's just like, you have that weird like cognitive dissonance where you're murdering like hundreds of people per game, but like
hundreds.
But like Drake, he's by all accounts he's like a genocidal maniac, right? But like
if you're looking at it literally,
yeah. But like he's still the good guy, and he like doesn't necessarily want to kill people. It's just
they're just shooting at him,
right? So and it's just one of those things that you never kind of like wrestle with the morality of it.
It's the suspension of disbelief.
Right. Yes. Thank you. So here, when he's a young kid, he kills his first person by accident because he's running away, and they're like up on the rooftops, and he bumps into a guy and pushes him, and the guy falls off the roof, and you can see it in his face. He's like, "Oh my God, I just killed a guy." And I thought that was a really cool moment that you kind of see, like, he wasn't always just like, whatever, if you're shooting at me, you might as well be dead. It's just like
he really didn't want to.
Yeah.
I mean, even in Uncharted 2, they kind of have that little moment too, because when you're breaking into the museum in the first couple missions of the game, he tells Harry like no guns, and that's the thing. Like you can knock them out, but you can't kill them. They're just security guards. They're not doing anything wrong.
Right? Yeah, they're just doing their job. They're not really posing a real threat to us, type thing. Yeah. And you kind of see that even though he just accidentally killed that guy, he's still not to the point where he's like ready to shoot someone, because one of Marlowe's men has him at gunpoint, and Drake is like, he's holding a gun up, but his hand's shaking. And the guy's like, "Oh, it's fine. You're not going to shoot me. Just close your eyes. It won't hurt a bit." And then you hear a gunshot.
So over dramatic for that moment. Any other henchman would have just shot the kid. If he was
really,
directed to shoot him, he just would have shot him.
Weird for just like this random
It's
guy.
a lot of characterization for a guy that you're never going to see ever,
Right.
or know his name.
He's even got like cool sunglasses on that like makes him like look a little bit different.
You know
than all
what?
The other guys.
I wonder, did he look like who's the dude who works for Marlowe?
Oh, Talbot?
Did he look like Talbot to you?
It's hard to say because
I wonder
of the
right?
But I feel like their voices were different.
I don't know. Anyway, go on.
So you hear the gunshot, but it was Sullivan that shot the guy from behind. So
And Sully starts the whole chase off because he sees Marlowe trying to kill Nate, and he's like, "Are you nuts? He's just a kid."
Right? Yeah, because she like slapped him, and he's
Yeah.
like, "Marlowe, like he's just a kid. Don't slap him again. Like just." Meh.
And that's when he realizes she's fucking nuts.
Right. So then, they go off and they get some dinner together, and you kind of get a little more backstory on the two, and how Nate's like, "Oh, this is like a family heirloom, this ring, so I'm just going to keep it because I'm a Drake," or whatever. And
I mean, and up until this point, we all thought he actually was a Drake.
Sure.
Like, it wasn't until Uncharted 4 that you found out he actually wasn't. But anyway, go on.
And then Sully kind of explains, like, "Listen, man, like, I'm working for Marlowe, or I was, but like I don't get all the details. They tell me to get something, I get it, they pay me. It's that kind of deal. And I'm pretty sure I'm fired at this point because like they only got half the stuff. That being the decoder
Well, and
thing.
he also stopped them from getting it.
Right. And they're like, yeah, so I guess it's just going to be a stalemate because you need both the ring and the decoder to figure out the next clue. So I guess we're just going to kind of wait on this. And then you go back to present day. They're in the alley, but they're not dead. They still have the ring.
Because they swapped out the ring that Marlo thought she got with a fake one.
Right, so Marlo stole a fake one off of him. And they're like, great, we flushed him out of their hole.
Why you gotta make everything sound so dirty? That's such a good joke.
Yeah.
Like, I think this game has some of the funniest writing out of the series. It's like Uncharted 4 is so heavy. It's great, but it's a very heavy game.
Yeah, it definitely, you lose a lot of that, like, Sully, Nate
dynamic.
Right.
And even like Sully, Nate, and Elena are like almost like the Three Stooges of, not of video games, but like they kind of have that dynamic where they just kind of poke fun at each other. All three of them just make fun of each other. It's a good dynamic.
Yeah. So they follow them back. This is Sully, Nate, and Cutter. They meet up with Chloe. Best character ever. Yay, Chloe.
I actually saw a behind the scenes thing where actually you could see what Claudia Black looks like. She kind of looks like Chloe.
Just like the white version of the Indian woman.
Yeah. Is Chloe actually Indian?
Yeah. So
did they ever say what her ethnicity is?
Yeah. In what was that other, like the Lost Legacy?
Lost Legacy, yeah.
Where you learn like, yes, she is Indian, but she grew up in Australia.
Yeah.
So like that's why she's got the Australian accent, but she still has like kind of family ties to Indian culture.
Maybe I just think she looks like her because of the voice, because she is her voice. So like it just in my head, I'm just putting it together. But anyway, so you meet Chloe and Cutter. Chloe is the getaway driver.
Right. So she has followed them up to their like secret hideout, which is like this warehouse somewhere.
Well, and then you go into the warehouse and they can't find the car. The car just disappears. You see the tire tracks, and there's like a secret mechanism that they figure out. They have to stand on these 4 tiles, like to simulate the weight of the car, and then shine their flashlights to a wall where it has light sensors.
Right, to simulate the headlights.
And they go in, and that's the first hint where there's like, who are these people? How do they have this like secret place in the middle of London? It's just crazy. And so they go down like the it's not really catacombs. They do actually get into older parts of the city though. Like that's one thing they comment on. They keep getting farther into this like tunnel, and it kind of turns into like old service tunnels and then like old abandoned subway stations and stuff like that. And the time periods just keep getting older. It goes back to like the 15th century, then like the 14th century or something like that. And they can tell by the architecture and the ironwork. And eventually you keep going down until you get to where their actual secret hideout or base is, and it's just filled with all these artifacts everywhere. It was a really cool looking like room. It looked awesome.
Yeah. So it's like you said. So they have their warehouse that turns into like metro service tunnels. Then it's like maybe like 1800s train station type thing. And then they specifically say like, oh, this is like a 16th century building. This is weird. Like, why is this down here? That's like full of all their like weird antiquities and stuff. And that's when they start hearing Marlo and Talbot and people talking, because they think they have the ring and they got the decoder. And she says, 400 years of waiting. So that was like, must have been 1600s when Sir Francis Drake was around?
I don't know, actually. Let's look that up. I wonder if they're actually right with that. I'll look up Sir Francis Drake. He's listed as an English pirate. It kind of makes sense. It's not exactly 1-to-1, but he died on January 28th, 1596, which would have been a little more than 400 years, but like 450.
400-ish, sure.
But she said more than 400 years, right? Or what?
I wrote down 400 years of waiting, but she may have said like over 400.
He was born in 1540 and died in 1596, so he was 56 when he died.
Okay. I guess that's pretty good for that.
That's
that time
good
period.
for back then.
And that's when they discover, like, wait a minute, this ring is fake, and this was clearly a setup, and they probably followed us back. So let's, like, I don't know, split up and go look for them or whatever.
Yeah.
Because, like, they still need that ring. So they leave the room, and just like leave 2 guys there that we quickly dispatch.
And then you find that you get the decoder, the decoder ring,
Right.
and then you decipher. I think it's something on their map. They have a map there, and I think he deciphers something on the map there.
Right.
And then it points to this like pretty much like what was kind of like the head of the ship. I forget what it exactly was called. Do you have it written down?
I do. Okay, so they decode it, and it says long hidden. And Sully's like, "Oh, you got to be kidding me!" Like this.
what a douche move to do that. Like something that you can't find. It just is the secret. Just says long hidden.
Right. So that was an anagram for Golden Hind, which is Drake's ship.
That's what it was.
This was like one of the first things where I was like, so it's just coincidence that they have the figurehead of Drake's ship hanging in this room?
I think that one I can suspend my disbelief for only for this reason. They've been hunting this thing for 400 years, so why wouldn't they?
I guess.
Like, I can explain that one away just because this secret society has been hunting Drake's fortune, whatever that is, for over 400 years. And so it kind of makes sense. But there's other moments that, and you're all going to hear when we get to those moments, it's just, it doesn't make, like, they do a lot of, oh, that's convenient. Like,
yeah.
Like, even the moment we were just in there where they found that shrine, literally they get to that shrine by, they're running away from the bad guys after Drake steals back a journal, which will explain where that journal comes from. And as we progress through the story, but they're running away from them. And Elena's like, here, quick, hide in here. And we walk in, and it's conveniently the entrance to the shrine that we need.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I guess we're here already.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And like,
so there's a lot of moments like that. This one I actually can like kind of suspend my disbelief with because it's like, 400 years. I feel like the whole room is filled with Francis Drake crap.
And this is another one of those moments where Sully's kind of like in our position. Where he's, oh, well, great. Where are we going to find that? And Drake's like, oh, well, it's got to be in here, right? So it's like, I mean okay.
It makes sense, though, like I said, for that moment, just only because they wrote that spot well, even like in terms of story continuity, but I don't necessarily like the actual dialogue writing for that scene. Anyway, go on.
So he climbs up and they get in a shootout and he like falls down and breaks the Golden Hind open. And there's like a map or something in there that he grabs?
Yeah.
And then, the rest of the shootout of them getting away doesn't super matter.
No, I mean, not in terms of story. It's just, you're shooting your way out of the place you were just in, that whole secret underground base that you just went through all the different centuries of architecture for. You have to fight your way back out.
Mm-hmm. And there was one other thing that I really liked about that room is that they have like clever little bits of foreshadowing, like all throughout this game.
Mm-hmm.
One of which in this room, they have one of those spiders that we run into later.
You're right, they do. They even talk about it.
Yeah, where he
kind of like, what is that thing?
Right, and he kind of like looks at it, and it's like, oh, okay. And I feel like as I've gotten older, I notice a lot of this stuff more when it's like, it's not just coincidence that the writers are drawing attention to like these little random things.
Yeah.
If it's good writing, they're doing it for a reason, and it's always cool if you notice that. And then it pays off later, and you're like, I see what you were going for there.
I'm as smart as you.
Yeah. So they get out, and now they are in their like secret hideout or whatever. And this is where my first playthrough, the story kind of fell apart for me. Because Nate is saying a lot of stuff, and if you're not like following it to a T, then it gets a little confusing and you kind of lose the whole motivation.
So this is the scene where after they get it back, they're in like their base of operations and looks like some apartment loft.
Right.
And it's Cutter, Chloe, Sully, and Drake all talking about what their plan of attack is next. You're right, like they fly through those lines. Like they cram a lot of information into a very small and short scene.
Right. So the spark notes of this is that, oh yeah, and they bring up a lot of other names that I'm sure if you're like a historian, it's like really interesting. You had mentioned John D before, who his signature is like literally the 007. So he's like the first.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, actually.
The first like Bond guy. Yeah.
He's the first 007, as they said in the game.
Right. So that's one of those ones where it's like, I don't know how important that really is to the story. It's really cool, but it's also like more information that you're just kind of like throwing at us. So it kind of, if you get too much information thrown at you, you just kind of like start not absorbing it anymore. And that was kind of the issue for me here.
100%.
But then they figure like, oh, so what actually took Drake 6 months was not him just like floundering around in the East Indies for a while, because he's like this expert sailor that would only take him a month.
Yeah.
So for those other 5 months, he must have sailed over to the Rubal Khali Desert and found or was at least looking for, Iram of the Pillars.
Yes.
Or the City of Brass, whatever other names.
And they even talk about, they add in another person, T.E. Lawrence, who was searching for the same thing that Sir Francis Drake was. And they even mention how Sir Francis Drake had half the clues and T.E. Lawrence had the other half of the clues, but since they were, they didn't live anywhere near the same time. T.E. Lawrence lived in like the early 20th century, 1920s, 30s, that type of thing.
Okay. This is Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah, Lawrence of Arabia. The person who that movie is based off of. And so he's saying T. Lawrence had all these clues and Francis Drake had all these clues, but they only had half, and they didn't have each other's half.
Right. And this is all like super cool, interesting information, right? And then here is again where I kind of like just missed something, because they say Lawrence of Arabia was fascinated with the like Knights of the
Templar or something.
Templar, Knights Templar, thank you, and the occult, and he like documented every Crusader site that he could find, 2 of which included a specific symbol that was on this map that they found in the figurehead. And these 2 places were in Syria and France.
Which is bizarrely convenient that they know that. Like, why, how did they know, how did they remember that symbol? That, like, where is it written that T.E. Lawrence knew that those symbols?
Right, so I think the idea here, I was thinking about this because I came to that same conclusion as you, where I was like, wait, how did they know to look for that symbol?
I mean, they knew the symbol was on Francis Drake's map or whatever. They knew that, but they didn't know like how T.E. Lawrence found those symbols, right?
Right. So I'm assuming that Nathan had found all of T.E. Lawrence's documented stuff about the Crusader sites and just happened to be like, wait a minute, I recognize this symbol from some of this documentation I found.
Doesn't he have actually Lawrence's journal?
He might, actually.
Or he has like information. I mean, he conveniently always has the Journal of the Explorer.
Right, yeah. So if you can jump through all those hoops as they line them up for you, and the story makes sense to you so far, then the game is like, it makes sense and it's a good time. But for me, back in 2011, playing through this the first time, I did not follow through all those hoops.
Well, and they say everything's so fast, you're not going to. And it's not like you can replay the cutscene to rewatch it to understand what you're doing.
Right. Because then you suddenly find yourself in France. And you're like, okay, so we're in France now. I'm not entirely sure why I'm here. But, okay, cool. We're in France. And you're going up to what's supposed to be a 11th century castle, but it's like inside a Renaissance, like a French Renaissance chateau.
Yeah.
Right.
I will say this is the moment of the game where I started noticing their design strategies of designing set pieces and then creating a story around the set pieces. Versus, it's okay to do that. There's nothing wrong with it, but you have to have really strong writing to be able to make that cohesive. Versus when you can have like not as quite good writing, or not, maybe your writing isn't as strong if you design the concept, kind of like what Ratchet and Clank does. I'm not saying Ratchet and Clank's writing is bad by any stretch, but like Ratchet and Clank, they design a purpose for a space and then design a space around it. Naughty Dog generally designs the space first and then puts purpose into it. Kind of makes sense of the same thing. They designed the set piece first and then put purpose into the set piece with the story.
Which I guess kind of adds to the realism. If you're like, oh, we're in this old mansion, how are we going to get through an old mansion?
Well, it's not even that. Like, I'm talking about just pure plot points. Like, all right, we really like, and it's the reason why, and we'll get to it when you get to the capsized ocean liner. They knew they wanted to do a capsized ocean liner. Okay, how do we make the story work till we can get to the capsized ocean liner? And it did not work this time.
Yeah.
And everything else works pretty well. Like the chateau, which we'll explain why that's a set piece in a second. The chateau is just awesome. And then even like the set piece in, well, I guess the other one, it was in Turkey, right? It was Syria. The one in Syria isn't quite as much as a set piece as more of it as just like a big, oh no, there's some set piece-y type of things. And anyway, but yeah, they go to France and they're trying to find, basically there's these 2 tombs in each of these locations in France and Syria. And like you said, they know about it because T.E. Lawrence found those symbols, and those symbols correspond to the stuff on Francis Drake's map. And so they're basically trying to go through each place so they can get a piece of this amulet from these two knights. They were Knights of the Templar, and they're trying. Each knight has half of the piece.
Right. So they don't know that to start. They're just like, there's some sort of clue here, so I guess we should check it out. And Drake does mention that Godfrey is the crusader that had lived there, and they say like maybe he brought some secrets back from Arabia, because I guess he was there at some point.
It is weird. Like, that's just that actually, now that I think about it, like, why does he, like, this whole thing is predicated on the fact that they are able to figure out the next step based off of what the Crusaders did. Actually, no, this story makes no sense. So now that I'm really thinking about it, because like where I'm at now, in the shrine we were just at, so we're already almost an hour in, so let's kind of power through this because we're going pretty slow with this. But we'll talk about the set piece, but we'll get to the spot that I'm getting confused with in a second. Then, so you go into the French chateau and you find out that it was once a castle, and the only all that's left of the castle is this one section. So you go to it and you go down into it, and then you get the one piece from the knight, and then that's where the spiders come in. Right. Or no, sorry, actually the spiders, are they before or after?
So there's one more point that I want to point out here that I really liked about this.
Yes.
Which is another foreshadowing point, where as they're breaking into the mansion, Nate says, "Oh, let me guess, Sully, you're going to just sit back and smoke a cigar again." And he goes, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, just try not to burn the place down."
And of course, that's the set piece. It's running through a burning chateau from the roof too, right, trying to escape this chateau that's been lit on fire by Marlowe's men.
Right. So like one of those little things that you might not have. It's one of those like second playthrough things. Where you're like, that's cool. That's cool that you put in there. But yeah. So right after they get the amulet from the Templar tomb, Talbot like holds them at gunpoint and steals it from him.
That's what it is, and that's when the spiders come out.
And you're like, what the hell are these spiders?
And they like, you see them jump. They actually show you right in that scene. They take one of Talbot's men, gets attacked by them and gets like swarmed.
Yeah,
and it almost seems like they just suck all the fluids out of him because he almost was mummified instantly.
It's one of those really weird kind of like the scarabs from the Mummy movies type thing, where like it's not going under your skin, but they just kind of like swarm you and then you're just like a husk.
Yeah.
There's not really any reasoning behind this, but there's spiders in all of these places, I guess.
Yeah, conveniently.
Right.
From like literally places far apart from each other. Syria to France to where we were just at, which I think was in Turkey. I think that's.
Or was that Yemen?
That was in Yemen?
Yemen, okay. I think you're in, yeah.
But they're still like, they're not close to each other.
Right, yeah. It's just, so it's like, did the Crusaders bring these back with them?
Is this like a defense mechanism that they're using to hide all these secrets? That they put
there on purpose? It's just, I don't know, man. It's weird. But, so the place burns down. A really cool set piece with fighting through the burning building and running around the roof as it's collapsing and all that stuff. Like, these are the great things about Uncharted 3, is these really interesting set pieces.
And like even the parts of the set pieces that don't make sense for the story are still really good. That capsized ocean liner we keep talking about is one of the most fun segments of the game, if only it made sense for the story.
Right. So they get out of here, and this is when Sully says, like, I gotta say I'm losing the plot here. And that was one of those, like, that's so great that you said that, because I also am very confused as to what's happening.
And Nate gets mad at him for
He
that.
does get mad at him. But thankfully the whole kind of scene is ended when he goes like, oh shit, Marlowe's men found us here. What about Cutter and Chloe? Because they went to Syria to check out that other site.
And so you go to Syria, and you break into like this museum type of thing. It almost looks like a museum, or like it just might be like a tourist spot. Like
right.
It's an old castle.
Right.
And this actually has one of my favorite puzzles in the game. Is where actually one thing I will say, I think that out of everything in Uncharted 3, the thing that I actually love the most about this game are the puzzles. I actually think it had better puzzles than Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 1. Like, I actually think these puzzles were, like, really fun to do. They kind of challenged you a little bit more than the Uncharted 1 ones did.
Mm-hmm.
But in this one, you basically had to, they find their way into the crypt. After, of course, Cutter gets basically the men do find you. Marlowe's men do find you, and all of you there, not just you and Sully, but you, Cutter, Sully, and Chloe in Syria. And it's a weird scene because what's her right hand man name again? I always forget. Talbot. I keep forgetting his name. So Talbot like somehow sneaks up on Cutter without anyone else seeing him or him seeing him, and he shoots him with like this like weird almost like it
was like a blow dart.
Yeah, it was like almost like truth serum in the dart, because now he's very suggestive. And so he tells him, give me your gun, give me your journal. And it's not the journal that Drake has, but Cutter's been doing a lot of research on his own, and he has a lot of the information they need. And he gives Talbot the journal, which essentially gives it to Marlowe, the villain of the game. And then he also, right at the last second, is like, don't trust Drake. And that's it. And then they are able to figure out how to get in. They know that Talbot has Cutter's journal and that Cutter lost his gun because he just gave it to him, and he didn't. They saw the blow dart in him, so they knew it. They knew something happened. But they figure out a way into the tomb. Yeah, sorry, yeah.
There's one other little piece before all this happened, when they first meet up with Cutter and Chloe.
Yeah.
And Nate goes, we've been trying to contact you for the last 24 hours.
This is a good scene.
And Cutter goes, oh, all right, I need to top off my minutes. You're using a prepaid phone? What? Those contracts are a complete ripoff. And he looks over to Chloe and she goes, what? Mine's broken. Again? It was just one of those like.
Once again, the dialogue in this is like the humor parts of this is so good.
And again, such a great product at the time, because like 2011 phone contracts were like way worse than even they are now.
Oh my god!
And it's just like, chef kiss, so good.
They find their way into the crypt, like into this other knight's like tomb, and the puzzle that I like in this is that you see those spiders again in this section where you have to like hop from these you have to throw the torches to different platforms to clear away the spiders from that platform. And the whole objective is that you're trying to turn on the water for it, because the water will travel down and it kind of makes this giant stone globe float, because all the water goes underneath it. And even though that makes no sense, because stone shouldn't float, but whatever, I guess it's okay.
It's a stone full of helium, obviously.
That's it. And then you walk up the stairs and you turn and you light these giant braziers. I don't know if they're braziers, but they're these giant like statues, and there's like so the fire will go up inside them and shine a light down, and it's the globe, and you just have to match the globe to the light that's going to turn on.
It's like projecting kind of a shape onto the globe that you need to match up with the country.
And then they use that to get into the temple, or to get into the actual tomb, and then that's where they find the other half of the amulet. Now, I don't quite... The next part that comes after this is... where do they go right after this?
Okay, so at this point, they have the amulet.
Yeah, they should have both. Well, Marlowe has the other half of it, but Nate
right, so that you have like a rubbing of it.
They do have both halves of it now.
So at this point, Talbot shows up again, and he's like, "Hey, Cutter, point your gun at them. And we're going to point our guns at them, too. And then you guys are going to have to throw your guns down, except for Cutter, who's apparently on their side because he's, like, all drugged or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, like, I guess give us the rest
of the
this is
another
info.
bullshit thing.
Yeah, and then, so Cutter's like, haha, I tricked you. I wasn't actually mind-controlled. And he shoots Talbot.
But he still made all the people drop their guns.
Right. So it's like, Cutter, why didn't you just shoot him in the first place? And then everyone would still have their guns.
It doesn't make any sense.
Anyway, so then they're all running away, and Sully, Nate, and Chloe all make the jump, but then Cutter's up there because, like, I don't know, something was on fire and like some wooden supports
This section
fell.
was also kind of bullshit because there's a lot of rockets firing at you, and you get a sniper, and you have to take out the rockets in this section, and there's so many, and you can't see where they're all coming from, and you could get killed and not even know it. It's awful. Anyway, go on though. So they make the jump, and Cutter's left up there by himself.
Cutter's left up there, right? So then you have Marlowe and Talbot both show up, and he's like, I just shot Talbot. Why aren't you dead?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, maybe he had a bulletproof vest or something on. Like, it's fine. It's just he's weird and whatever. And I thought it was interesting because Marlowe was saying that he had potential because, like, I guess Cutter had been working with them before. Because you can tell he's very much like the same kind of like Drake character where he's really interested in this old stuff and he's like really good at tracking it down. Maybe he was just kind of like on the wrong side for a little while.
Yeah.
That was like interesting little kind of subtle backstory to him. But then she says like, yes, it's almost as though this were all in the cards, and plants a tarot card on him before lighting the tower on fire.
Does she actually plant it on him?
I'm pretty sure that's when she slips it in on him.
Yeah.
At that point. And then he has to jump off the tower.
Breaks his leg.
Right. Otherwise he would
on
burn
the jump.
to death. And then he pulls it out, and it's like the tower is the tarot card, and it shows it on fire with like a guy falling off of it, and it was like, what? And that was another one of those like weird.
Like, why is she part of the occult now?
Right. Like, why?
Like,
I get that she's mysterious and like maybe she does this stuff,
but like,
it's like
that,
there's
like,
no.
To me, that's actually a little bit lazy writing because someone. I think their society, because apparently I actually did look up John Dee, and I actually want to kind of read more about this guy. But he was a mathematician, astronomer, astrologer, and occult philosopher. So it makes sense if they were part of the same organization that John Dee started, that they would be part of an occult, or the occult. But like that doesn't mean that it's not like every subsect of like bizarre occult, like cults that exist, all use tarot cards. Right. That's a weird. It's almost just like, I don't know. He's into shady shit. They're into like supernatural stuff. Let's throw a couple tarot cards in him, and that'll make it creepy.
Yeah. And it's never like referenced ever at all in the rest of the game.
No,
it's just kind of like there's these little weird things that I guess they're weird.
None of their super, like, did they ever explain how Talbot was able to survive that?
No. And they never explain how he, like, when he originally dosed Cutter and he like goes around a corner and then he just disappears. It was like, what? Like, the Uncharted games always have like a little bit of supernatural kind of stuff in them, but that's like too much. Like, what is he, just a ghost?
But like they always explain it in a way, in a sense where it's not too much explaining, it's just the right amount. So for perfect example, the like snow yetis from Uncharted 2 or whatever, the yeti people, they became all hulked up because of the sap, like the tree sap, right? But that doesn't, okay.
So they're just roided up dudes in yeti suits.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like, you don't know why the sap does it, but it's enough of an explanation where you're not going to question it. You're like, okay, yeah, the sap's supernatural, it does weird shit. I can understand that. Same thing in the first one. The people turn into those zombie monster things by like breathing in the dust from
like some kind of
El
spores
Dorado
or something on it.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, doesn't make any sense, but at the same time, like, at least you gave me a reason as to why these things exist. They do this stuff and they never, it's not even like, if they had a bullshit way to explain it, I'd be more accepting of it, but they just don't do anything. It just, they set, it's the fact that they set up these supernatural things with these villains and then they never come to fruition. And even like, why didn't that save him in the end? Like, you shoot Marlowe, don't you? You shoot, or you like,
You definitely shoot Talbot. I don't know. Marlowe might just like die in the sand or something.
I think so. Yeah, I didn't get to that portion of my replay.
But anyway, it's just one of those little things. So you shoot your way out of the castle, and you get away on like a tour bus that came in the morning.
Yeah, and that's also where Cutter and Chloe leave for the rest of the game.
Right. So Cutter's leg's busted, and Chloe's like going to take care of him.
Well, and apparently Cutter was supposed to be part of the rest of the game, but because of contract issues, the voice actor couldn't do it anymore. He apparently was contractually obligated for something else that he didn't even know about or forgot about, so he had to stop midway through. And that's why he's kind of like hastily written out of the rest of the game. Like he was supposed to be in more of the game, but they wrote it out this way to cap off his story, type of thing.
Okay, yeah, I guess it makes sense then that his like the writing around him at the end there was like pretty hastily made, which is a real shame because he's like could have been a much more interesting character.
He's
if
a very
if they
interesting
kept him
character.
around. Yeah. But he does say because Drake's like, oh man. Like, all this shit's going down, and Sully's like, maybe we should get out while we're still alive. And Cutter's like, hey, we got it this far. Like, don't pussy out on me, man. Like, go, I broke my leg for this shit. Like, you go find this, whatever.
I think this is where it really starts to, well, we keep saying it's where it really starts to, like, but I guess this is another one of the moments that really made me realize like the problems with this story is that I still don't understand Drake's motivation entirely. Like, why is he so passionate about this? You already found, like, I could understand if this was like the way they kind of posit it is that he wants to do this so he can prove that Drake wasn't just putzing around in the East Indies for 6 months, that Francis Drake was not just putzing around in the East Indies for 6 months. And that he wants to prove that Francis Drake did something crazy and he like, and I could understand if like he just wants to prove that for the sake of like proving it, but it doesn't feel like it's a strong enough motivation for him. Like Drake's never needed that motivation before. All of the motivations prior was that he, like in the first game, it makes sense because he was using Elena to find a score so he could make some money. And in the second game, he was double crossed and kind of almost did it out of revenge. And it started with him like, and also he genuinely loves like the history aspect of it. So it turns into like, it's a combination of like, okay, I'm in this for money or I'm in this for revenge, but I also really just want to know what happens. This one, there's no motivation other than, all right, I'd like to know what happens, but he doesn't even like the way he talks about it. It doesn't you never get the sense that that's why. It's just he's talking about it because he likes history,
right? And there's, I think, at least 2 points in the story thus far. People have brought up like, Nate, why are you so obsessed with doing this? And obsessed is the word that they use.
Yeah,
right?
And he is obsessed.
And it's the next scene because they need to get into Yemen. Sully's going to call a friend that can help them get in there,
which is Elena,
real quick. Right. So Elena is a reporter now. Well, I guess she's always been a reporter.
She's always been.
But she's like a foreign correspondent, and she's working in Yemen.
Well, she was also in the second one. That's why she was hunting Lazarevich.
Right.
But anyway, go on.
So she was able to get them like press passes and kind of hurry them in. And then it's like, first off, you see that Elena is still wearing a wedding ring, and Nate says, "Hey, you're still wearing it." So at some point between Uncharted 2 and 3, they got married and then had been separated, which was one of those things where it's like, I
would have liked to have seen that.
Yeah.
Or like saw the development of that, not just be told about it afterwards.
Right. And like looking back at it now, I kind of appreciate that we didn't have to like, that might have been like kind of painful to watch. Yeah. And you get a bit of that in Uncharted 4.
In fact, in the behind the scenes stuff, because there would have been like a kissing scene or something. I don't know, like romantic stuff in video games doesn't always work well. It's hard to pull off. They were talking about when they were doing the mocap for like Claudia Black and that's Claudia Black, right?
For Chloe.
For Chloe, yeah. Claudia Black, dear Lord, and Nolan North. When they were doing the scene where like Chloe's kind of like seducing Nate and she's like sitting on top of him and being all flirtatious and they start kissing, they were saying how like it's the most awkward thing for them to animate to kissing. And it's not because it's like the kissing itself is awkward. It's just so difficult to animate and not make it look the most strange and surreal thing in the world. They were joking around though, Nolan and Claudia, saying they couldn't actually like. They said you can kiss if it helps the scene, but it doesn't make a difference because we don't animate your faces. So what they were doing is they would lay on top of each other, and then their faces were like an inch apart from each other, and they were just kind of going like back and forth like they were kissing, but not actually touching. It was really funny to actually like watch.
That's pretty good.
No, so they go to Yemen. Elena is now not now, but she's a reporter, and she gets some press passes, and that's pretty much where I'm at in the game.
Right. And one of the first things that she asks is like, so why were you guys like rushing to get here? And then it goes to her going like, gosh, Nate, why are you so obsessed with this whole ring thing? For the third time at this point in the game, it's like,
yeah,
they're really hammering it through that Nate is obsessed, and they haven't really given him a real reason to be.
Do they ever? Do you remember? I don't think they do.
Yeah, I don't think they do either. I think it's just kind of assumed that like this is, you're a Drake, and this is like Francis Drake's legacy, so you have to find it. And I guess
but then you find out later he's not a Drake at all.
Right.
So it's like they wrote themselves out of it, right? I mean, granted, that might not necessarily be the fault of this game, because I bet you Bruce Straley and Neil Druckmann, who did Uncharted 4, they probably wrote that out as that would be a really cool thing, but it kind of ruined that. Like, if Nate was actually a relative of Sir Francis Drake, I could understand this a bit more, because he wants to prove his relative was doing something. Right. You know what I mean? But but even in this game, even knowing that, it never felt that way. It never felt like he was trying to avenge his ancestor or something like that.
Right.
What I wanted to say before, I remember I was saying how a little bit ago how the plot made absolutely no sense, and this is where we're getting to the part where like it's starting to really confuse me. So, not starting to. It's been confusing me. Mm-hmm. But so, you go to Yemen, they actually see Talbot, who stole Cutter's journal beforehand. That you fight Talbot, you steal the journal back, and then conveniently you end up in the shrine where you needed to go. Like I mentioned before, the convenience of it. And this is where I start to get like just completely like lost in it, right? So T.E. Lawrence is the one who knew of the location of the Crusader castles, the one in Syria and the one in Yemen. You got the two necklace pieces, you brought them together, and that led you... the one in Syria, the one in France, not the one in Yemen. You got the two necklace pieces, you brought them together, and that directed them to Yemen. Right? I forget how exactly it directed them to Yemen, but it directed them to Yemen.
Right. It might have had some sort of like writing that they decoded around it that said something about Yemen. And then like it was almost like a Star of David type like alchemy symbol.
Yes.
That they found on the grate to a well that they just kind of stumbled upon. That was like, oh, this is totally the spot we need to be at.
So there was two Crusaders who had that, right?
Right.
The thing that would lead them to Yemen. So what I'm confused about is I know there was multiple crusades, but like, why would Francis Drake how would the Crusaders find this thing in Yemen? Like the way that they would have had those two pieces is that those two soldiers would have had to have been part of this secret society, and then they would have also had to have had like known where this shrine whatever thing was in Yemen. And this shrine tells you how to get to the Atlantis of the Sands. It tells you how to get to the ancient city.
Oh, so why didn't they just do it?
Yes, and on top of that, and that's assuming that I don't know when exactly. So the Crusades happened between the 1095 AD and 1492 AD. So like there was multiple ones. There was like multiple Crusades. I didn't know they were like 400 years apart from each other. That is kind of crazy.
There's like the Children's Crusade.
But I guess that would actually kind of make sense because Sir Francis Drake did live during the 1400s. So if the Crusades were happening in the 1400s, okay, I guess that kind of checks out. It didn't make any sense to me. Like, I don't know. Someone else has it as a different timeline. It only goes to 1291, which Sir Francis Drake wouldn't have been alive for.
So
It's just it's strange to me. I guess
so at one point someone said that so the city was lost to the sands and like God struck it down for their arrogance.
Yeah.
Right? So the only explanation I can come up with as to why the Crusaders themselves wouldn't have gone and found the city is maybe they were kind of like God smote it, so maybe we should just leave it buried in the sand
and hide it. I guess.
Yeah,
Like,
I
don't
guess.
know.
I
But
don't
then
know.
why would they even write any of this shit down? I
Right,
don't
yeah.
know.
Why would they even leave clues to find it if they were trying to...
I'm so confused. Anyway, so this is where I got stuck. I shouldn't say got stuck, but this is where I got up to before we recorded this. So you'll actually remember this. You took more notes about this after than what I'll remember. Only thing I remember after this, in all honesty, is the capsized ocean liner where Drake gets captured and put on the ocean liner for no reason. And then he conveniently wakes up, like after the ocean liner comes back, he conveniently washes up on the shore right where he needs to be.
Right. Okay, so I'll run through all my notes real quick up to that point.
Okay.
So they find this the shrine place.
Yes.
That kind of gives you the location basically of Aram of the Pillars.
Yes.
Right. And I think it was like a star map that you find.
Yep, and that's how they find it.
Right. So Sullivan, who used to be in the Navy, he's like really good about like navigating via stars. So they didn't have time to write it down, but he's like, I got it up here in my brain. So I will be the map. Right. And on their way out, they see all these messages that were left by Sir Francis Drake, and they know that because they're all in English. And it's all like, a cup of blood is filled for thee, and like, don't believe the mirages of the desert, and like, don't be taken in by the beauty of the world because it's all like a lie, or
Yeah.
all this like really creepy,
Like
ominous shit.
type
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, they're like, Drake, why are you so obsessed with finding this? Because
when Francis Drake stopped
Right.
when Francis Drake stopped right here.
this ancestor that you're trying to follow is like, I'm gonna stop following this, and I'm gonna pretend that I got lost in the East Indies for 5 months, and I'm gonna tell the Queen that I couldn't find whatever it was you were looking for. And it's like, why are you so obsessed with finding this? Because it's like, you found it, so why don't we just cut it off here? Because like, it's not worth it, right? So at this point, Nate gets dosed by Talbot in the market,
Okay, that's what it is.
and he's like running after him, and it's like this weird like fever dream acid trip level that's like whatever. But he wakes up and he's sitting in a cafe with Marlowe, who has the ring, the decoder device, his journal, and then like all of these records on Nate. And that's when you find out. She's like, "Oh, you're not even a real Drake, are you?" And
You find out in this game, not even.
yeah, they don't tell you what his actual name was, but you know, like, oh, his mother committed suicide. That's
Yeah.
I think they like retcon that in Uncharted 4, but they say that the mother committed suicide and the father surrendered them to. I don't know. It might have just said surrendered him, so I don't think they included his brother at this
Because
point.
his brother was too old, I think that's probably why. Because
Okay.
that's why if you notice in Uncharted 4, his brother's not in like the boarding school.
Yeah, I kind of assumed that he was for a time because I felt like he was kind of familiar with like the Catholic nun teaching style.
Actually, you're right. I think he was. Anyway,
Anyway, and they're like, oh, and we have Sullivan because you told us under our truth serum that he was the map basically to get to Aram of the Pillars. And so we found him, so we don't need you anymore. But so we're gonna give you to this pirate guy, and he's gonna get rid of you. And that's where you meet Ramses, who I guess you get like knocked out.
Yeah.
And then you wake up again in this like ship graveyard, and Ramses the pirate is like, "Hey, they killed me. They paid me to kill you and dispose of your body, but I'm a super nice guy, so I'm gonna keep you alive. You should tell me where Aram of the Pillars is because maybe I want all that money." So that was like the kind of shoehorned motivation for him.
Like, there's no reason for him to be alive. Why don't they just shoot him right there?
Right. Yeah, because
Marlo was so willing to kill a kid in the beginning of the game, but now she suddenly can't kill an adult in the middle of us.
yeah, I guess she just didn't want to get her own hands dirty.
She was willing to shoot a kid.
Well,
I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me.
anyway, so that's where Ramses is like, "Hey, you should help me, and I'm gonna leave the room so my brutes can like beat you up and shit until you tell us the truth as to where
and
this
then
place
you
is.
escape. You fight your way onto the ocean liner.
Right. So this, while this makes like really no sense to the story, these are some of my favorite levels.
Oh,
Like,
it's great level.
the ship graveyard is dope, where there's just like all the shit is broken, and it's like I love that kind of like post-apocalyptic type areas where you're fighting in, and like there's like a lot of swimming involved, and you're like shooting from the water, and you're like diving under and crawling up on boats and like stealth killing dudes, and it's like really cool the whole fight through. And of course all these boats are like wrecked, right? And I don't know if you're just like out in the middle of the ocean where like all of this stuff is kind of congealed, like the like Trash Island where it's just kind of the way the currents work or something.
Yeah.
But there's a cruise ship that is still functioning that is about to leave, and you're like, that's my ticket out of here, right? And you do like kind of an annoying fight where you're jumping from like boat to boat as like rockets are getting shot at you and shit.
Yeah.
You remember that part?
I think so, yeah.
But you make it up onto the boat, and I think you probably want to talk about the cruise ship bit.
I mean, I don't remember too much about it now, but I just remember the cap. So you make it onto the boat, and then essentially you cause the boat to start sinking. I forget exactly how it happens.
I think so. Drake is assuming that they have Sully on this cruise ship because he fights his way all the way through and down into like the depths of the ship where like all the storage stuff is, and there's someone tied up there. But he gets there, and it's like a dummy that's tied up. Which for me, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I got a little ahead of myself. Ramsey said that he had Sully,
That's what it was.
and he was like, "Oh well, if you're not gonna talk, then I'll go talk to your friend." And that was Nate's motivation to get onto this boat and try to find Sully. Turns out they never had him in the first place because Marlowe has Sully.
And like, why would they even go to the trouble of setting up a dummy if they didn't have like?
Right.
Because as far as you're concerned, Drake's dead.
Yeah.
Like
how
why would
they-
you even bother?
How would they figure on him getting out and even getting onto the cruise ship? Why would they have put forth the effort to
It
do
doesn't
that?
make any sense.
Anyway, so in the bottom of the cruise ship, somebody shoots like an explosive, and that starts the whole plane starts taking in water. And,
Yeah,
like, tips
someone
over.
it was one of his own men too, wasn't it?
Probably, yeah.
These villains, man.
Yeah, but again, it's like super cool because you got to like fight your way up, and it's like one of those. I feel like they might have done this in Titanic, where it's like kind of on its side or something.
The ocean liner turns sideways, and then you have to start platforming with the ocean liner sideways. So like the doors are opening up, and like
Right.
you have to open the doors up to use them as platforms so that for you to stand on.
And it's like really interesting use of the space because these are all rooms that you've gone through before to get down there, but now they're on their side. So you're going through the same place, but it's all kind of like
And it's making you
poltergeisted
use a
around.
completely different muscle, like brain muscle, to like figure out where you need to go next.
Right, where it's like normally you would just walk through this room and maybe use this bed for cover. But now you need to get up. That doorway that you want to walk through is on the ceiling, and you have to use this bed and like this old cabinet to kind of like jump your way up out of that door up to the next room. And there's even like stairwells where you're not using the stairs, you're just like running up the wall.
Oh yeah.
It's
There's so much of it's just like so imaginative.
Yeah.
I will say just a real quick comment about the platforming in the game. There's a couple moments in the game. I don't remember much with the ocean liner, but there's a couple moments in the game where I actually don't think they broadcasted very well of where you need to jump to next. Because there's a lot of times like I'll jump for something. I'm like, I don't see where that you want me to go. So I'm going to try something and then you die.
Right.
And it's just like that's for a game series that used to like be pretty blatant about where you need to jump to, like where you can and can't jump to. There's a couple times in my recent playthrough that I just couldn't figure it out. And even, I mean, I did obviously, but I couldn't figure it out for one or two times. And even when we were going down into the shrine where I stopped at, that, a lot of this stuff, find out where Arama the Pillars is, as you're climbing down, where you're able to climb just stops. I was like, okay, I guess they just want me to drop, but that kills you.
Mm-hmm.
But in actuality, there's a pipe that's connecting to it, and you have to shimmy over to the left to go on this pipe. But the pipe's very brown, and it kind of blends into the background, so it doesn't look like it's something that you're supposed to jump on or that you could.
Yeah.
But that's what you're supposed to do. And I didn't know that when I didn't die this time, but I remember when I first played it, I got really pissed because I'm like, why can't I survive this fall? And the worst part is, which makes it even more bullshit, is that what you literally do is you shimmy across that pipe into a grate and you go maybe an extra 2 feet down and then you drop and you're fine.
Right, yeah.
And it's just like, okay, it's because this is where you wanted me to, not that it's that I couldn't do it. It's just dumb.
Yeah, I feel like in Uncharted 1, they weren't clear enough. And then in Uncharted 2, they were very clear. And then in Uncharted 3, they were like, maybe we were too clear last time, so let's like kind of dial it back.
It's a weird mix.
And it's like kind of in between like being just clear enough that it doesn't make the environment look weird to have like a bright yellow thing that you need to jump to.
Yeah.
But like clear enough that you can still see it, but not so clear that it looks out of place. And I guess they can kind of get a little lost in the shuffle there if they're like, let's just make this pipe brown rather than having it be like, why not make it have, I don't know, like red electrical tape on it or something to kind of.
I don't know. But anyway, so going through the capsized ocean liner was just a really fun section to do.
But simultaneously very frustrating. So they talked a lot about the tech that went into it, where it's like, it's not just this ocean liner that's like rocking around as, you know, as a ship would do.
Yeah.
It's like totally dynamic. Like they designed like this dynamic ocean around the boat that's actually moving the ship around.
Okay.
So like every time you walk through it, and you're like stumbling around as this ship like tips
as you would if an ocean liner was doing that, yeah.
Right. But it's different every time you play it because this whole wave system is dynamically changing all the time.
That's pretty awesome.
And it's like super, super cool from like a tech standpoint. But as a player who's stumbling around in combat that's already like kind of frustratingly hard.
Kind of floaty.
Because, yeah, so like your aim...
No pun intended.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Your aim's like a little bit off because it's like kind of floaty and like you're trying to take cover, but this is late in the game, so you have like snipers and guys with rocket launchers and like heavily armored shotgun guys running at you while you're stumbling around. And it was like, oh God, playing that on Crushing was just like the worst.
I still can't believe you beat all of them on Crushing. Did you beat 4 on Crushing as well?
I think I'm like halfway through it on Crushing.
That's still nuts to
me.
me.
I'm up to a point where there's like this really, really frustrating room where you can just give yourself like the best gun and infinite ammo to kill them, and I think that's just what I'm gonna do because like I don't have the patience to play through it. That particular room on Crushing, like
it's just that bad.
Yeah,
I don't even remember. But anyway, go on.
But anyway, so the whole set piece is very impressive. Also very frustrating, but also very rewarding because it's like, yeah, take that boat, I wrecked you. But you make it all the way back up to like the kind of the big like dining room where they've got like pianos and like a dance floor and everything, and this big like dome window that was on the top of the boat, but now the boat is on its side. So you're looking like out of it like a normal window, like, oh, I'm just gonna look over to the right, and there's this giant window. And half of it is just water, because you know, like if you're in a submarine or something, and you're looking out the window.
Yeah.
Deal. And you're there with Ramses, the pirate that kidnapped you, and oh God, I should have written this down what he says, but he yells like "See you in hell, Bobby" or whatever, and he takes his shotgun and he shoots the window, so the whole place floods. And I guess you get like swept out into the ocean or something.
And then where do you conveniently land up on?
You wake up on the beach and you're like, okay, cool. He woke up on a beach and he looks up and it looks like, I guess you're still in Yemen. And there's the city that you were just in right there. And he goes, oh, that's convenient. And you're like, yeah, that is really convenient that you just happened to wash up right next to the city.
You don't even know where that boat was at.
Yeah. And then he just like walks up to Elena's hotel room and he's like, oh hey, like I'm cool.
It's funny because for how bullshit that moment up into that story point is, the moment Elena and Drake have in that hotel room, I think is one of my favorite moments of all the Uncharted games in terms of just the characters. Mm-hmm. Like them kind of reconciling whatever was going on with their marriage. I think they were supposed to be married.
Well, they had the rings. So,
yeah. Whatever, them kind of reconciling is like one of the best written things in just anything. Like it just, I love Drake's like. He finds where Sully's at because Elena knows where they're at.
Right.
Elena knows where they're going.
It was so touching because Elena had this whole rescue plan that like she was going to do alone. And Drake was like, "Oh my gosh, like you did all this work. You were going to do this without me." And she's like, "Well, I mean, for Sully, like, yeah, absolutely. Like he's our bro."
And oh my God, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. Like she does that, and then Drake's like, "All right, let's go." She's like, "No, we have time. Like it just take a breather." And he's exhausted, and she sits down, and he puts his head on her lap, and just passes out. And what is it? I forget exactly the line reading, but he tries to apologize. He goes, "Hey," and she just goes, "I know."
Yeah.
And it's just like he doesn't even get to say sorry, like the actual words, but you can like it was so well acted. Just not just in the animation that the animators did, but also in the voice performance by Nolan North and Emily
Rose.
It was just so, oh my God, that scene that made Nathan Drake and Elena like my favorite video game couple, period. Like it was just so good.
And that was one of those moments that kind of helped make up for the fact that you never really got to see them like get married and then have the relationship fall apart. You kind of get all the tones from that stuff that you missed, and it's like, okay, so they're kind of on good terms again. And that's kind of how you want to see them. You want to see them together, not break apart. So I guess if they're already broken apart, then all you're going to see is them getting back together.
And I love what they did with them in Uncharted 4 with their whole thing. Like they kind of, Uncharted 4 is interesting because it was kind of like a I mean, we don't want to talk about it too much because we will eventually cover it. But Uncharted 4 was interesting because it was kind of like, since it was made by the Last of Us designers, the directors, you see elements of Last of Us in there. Not in the horror elements, but you spend the first couple minutes just being interactive in a room, just like opening up like drawers and stuff like that, and just experiencing married life with Elena. It's kind of interesting. But anyway, I love those guys. I love them as a couple in the game. Like I think the way Naughty Dog has written them and created their characters are just really good characters and a really good couple.
For sure. So Elena's plan was, I guess, there was a flight that was going to be doing a supply drop to this caravan that Marlowe and Talbot have Sully on. This caravan out in the desert to find Irem of the Pillars.
Yeah.
They have a 2-day head start on them. So they can get into this plane that will be doing a supply drop to those guys. So they'll get dropped right onto the caravan, and then they can rescue Sully. So honestly, not all that well thought out to be like, we're just going to drop out in the middle of the desert and, I don't know, we'll steal a car and get back, I guess.
Yeah.
But still, like, okay, it's enough.
It's better than being like, oh, that's convenient.
Right. So they have to, like, fight their way onto this plane, which is another, like, I think the airport is kind of a cool area because there's, like, some good stealth areas, and there's not too many like bullshit things with like guys with rocket launchers and snipers.
No, I remember liking these missions.
Yeah,
like, trying to like fight your way onto the plane.
And then Drake tries to give Elena the slip. He's like, "Listen, like I don't want you to risk your life for this stupid thing that I've gotten myself into. I will go save Sully." And he ends up almost missing the plane because it's taking off in front of him. But Elena picks him up on a Jeep, and she's like, "Hey, I'll drive you up to the landing gear so you can jump on." And Nate says like, "Hey, it's like deja vu," because it totally is like in Uncharted 2 when they had to get him onto the train. And I was like, I love these callbacks. It's so good. And it's like
there's moments in this game where the writing's so well done, but then there's just like I actually think the individual dialogue writing is like really solid in this game. It's just all the plotting is just awful.
Right. So they still really nail those little fan servicey points. And like even if you haven't played the other games and they're just like, haha, deja vu, and you're like, okay, it doesn't make any difference to you, but it really does for the people that are stuck with it.
If you don't know it, then that creates it more of a world, because it's like, oh, they have like more of a history than we thought. They weren't just like husband and wife. They actually went on adventures together.
Right, yeah.
That kind of thing.
So he gets up onto the ship. Climbs up on the landing gear, and I guess he's like in some like the service hatches or something. Naturally, somebody finds him while they're up in the air, and they get in a big shootout, and he's like dangling out of the back of this cargo plane.
That fight was awesome.
Oh man, like And I think that was in the marketing materials, so you like kind of knew it was coming. But when it came and you were just like, oh shit, dude, like I'm hanging off of like this like mesh stuff that's holding all the packages together, and you're just like shooting guys and you're just like watching them fall out behind you, like just down hundreds of or thousands of feet down into the desert. Super cool. And you're like trying to climb your way up and shit.
Once again, a great set piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that fits with the story this time, unlike the ocean liner. But
right,
anyway,
right. So good on them. This is an overall very good level. And you survive because you're hanging onto one of the cargo things, and you pull the parachute on the cargo.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of hanging on the side of it as it like floats down. And the plane is just like flaming wreckage. Everybody's dead except you, and you grab a gun off of some dude in the sand, and you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna wander the desert until I find Sully.
And conveniently,
so they do try to give you a little bit of like suspension of convenience, I guess.
Yeah.
But you have like a full chapter where you're just kind of wandering the desert, and you're like seeing mirages of water, and you're like getting turned around, and you kind of like get that hopelessness.
Yeah.
And this is where they do a really great job for the first time with the sand, because like I don't think you've run into sand up until this point.
Not like this, at least.
And I'm pretty sure you've seen like all the kind of behind the scenes stuff where they send a bunch of the developers out just like to the beach and like to the desert to like just film dunes and have them like walk down them so they can see how the sand falls and how like the footprints are and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So they really took that and ran with it, because it's just like so good how all the sand works. And it's just, up to this point, I don't think any other game has.
No, I mean, like Naughty Dog consistently pushes the envelope further what the tech of the generation does.
Right. So super cool. And they give you that full chapter to kind of be like, oh gosh, I guess he's lost. And that's like totally what would happen if he fell off a plane out in the middle of the desert. So the next chapter, they're able to like, he finds a abandoned town, which is like, okay, like I could imagine that you would find like an abandoned town where like the well runs dry and all the people are like, well, I mean, we don't have water, so I guess we need to move somewhere, and we're not going to take our buildings with us, so okay.
Yeah.
So like, cool. And he's like looking around for water and stuff. He doesn't find, well, I guess he finds some like mud that he's able to drink. But more what he finds are a bunch of Marlowe's men. So good on him. I guess he made it far enough with the plane that he met up with the caravan in this place. Maybe they were looking for water as well to like kind of, because I guess they don't have their supplies from that plane because that's all blown up now. So maybe they would have to stop for water. So that's another really cool level. Again, for me, that kind of like post-apocalyptic look where like everything's in ruins. Yeah, it's like super great. Really enjoyed that level. And he is rescued by an Arab man on horseback who has him at gunpoint, and Drake's like, "No, please don't shoot me. Like, I'm not with them," type thing. And he's like, "All right, well, like, hop on this horse and we'll get you out of here." And they kind of explain that a little bit. So the guy's name is Salim, and he's the sheik of this tribe that like lives out in the Rubicali. And he's like, yeah, I didn't shoot you because like you were in need, and even an enemy deserves to be like, a little bit of hospitality or something. But like, are you my enemy, Mr. American guy?
Yeah.
And then Drake kind of explains like, these crazy people have my friend, and they're trying to find Aram of the Pillars, and I just want to get my friend back. And Salim is like, oh shit, that place is like cursed because King Solomon, who I guess was the king at the time out there.
That's interesting because Solomon is like a king from the Bible. So I don't know if that's like, if it's a biblical reference, maybe.
Not entirely sure. But he says that Solomon commanded the power of a jinn, like a genie in the bottle type dude.
Yeah.
And I guess the jinn was rebelling, so he imprisoned it in a brass container and cast it into the depths of the city, which then threw the city into chaos where like everyone went mad, and now like the city is just this place of evil, right? And we can't let these like crazy British Secret Service people get that, jinn trapped in brass, because like
They could unleash it to the world.
Right. Their whole deal is that they like control their enemies through like fear and stuff. So if there's this djinn that like makes people like super freaked out and go crazy, then like they can absolutely use that to their advantage because they already have these weird like blow darts that are making people kind of
suggestive,
hallucinate and shit. So like this would be that, but even worse on like a grand scale, right? So Nate's like, cool, we're gonna go save Sully. So I'm going to ride with these dudes on horseback, and we're going to catch up to that caravan. Again, really cool.
That was a great sequence, too, because, like, you're riding... I mean, it's kind of strange. You're riding on a camel, I think, at first, right? Or a horse. You're riding on a horse, and you have to run up... You hop onto the car, and you're hopping from, like, car to car and back onto horses at some point, trying to catch up to the main caravan to get Sully.
Yeah, so they did this before in Uncharted 2, when you're jumping from truck to truck as they're getting blown up. But this is like, it takes it to another level because there's like a crane, right? Wasn't there a crane that you had to like, you're like getting dragged behind and you're working your way up?
I think so.
I know that's in Uncharted 4 as well, but I'm pretty sure they did it in 3 first.
Anyway.
But it's super cool and you gotta like shoot rockets at the other cars and shit, and it's like, it's a grand old time. And I don't know if you save Sully right then, and then Sully's like, listen, like, these guys are crazy, and we need to catch up with them and stop them. Or if you save Sully, like, a little bit later as you're doing this stuff. But there's, like, a sandstorm that you have to fight through, which is also pretty cool.
That was a tough section, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was difficult because that's one of those times when the NPCs seem to have like a little bit better vision than you.
You rescue Sully then. So Nate and Salim destroy Marlowe's convoy and rescue Sully. Nate and Sully lose Salim in a sandstorm, which is what we're talking about right here. But eventually find an open gate. They just conveniently find an open gate to Ubar, or the Aram of the Pillars.
Right. Okay. So they make it into the city, and it's like super gorgeous. I love how they designed this city because it's like absolutely like super decadent, and like everything is shiny and I guess brass, maybe gold. They all call the city brass.
It's a gorgeous,
so
like the model work they did for this city is some of the best in any game, just period. It looks so good.
And there's even like machines, like some of the statues are like automated to be like moving their spears around and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, so they have like this technology. It's like super advanced for, you know, whatever time period this was originally built in. And it's just, again, that stuff is like super cool.
I'm a sucker for like an ancient lost city type of thing. I find that stuff just fascinating. Like, I'm glad they've never done Atlantis because it's almost too on the nose, but like El Dorado and kind of subverting what El Dorado was, Shambhala. I never even heard of Aram of the Pillars or Ubar until this game. Same thing with the secret city for the pirate city for Uncharted 4. I'm blanking on
Libertalia.
the name. Libertalia. Like, I had never heard of that before either. And I just think I love those types of like mythical type of things. Even though Libertalia, I don't think it ever actually existed. I think it was just stories. But like all the others, like Atlantis did legit exist. There's records of it, and just no one knows what happened to it, type of thing.
So you were saying that you're glad they didn't do Atlantis.
Yeah.
Stargate has Stargate Atlantis, which is very much like a very similar thing where they find the city and they're like super advanced. So it's just, I love that shit. It's so
stuff
cool.
like that. I'm like fascinated by it. It's like, it's really cliche in a sense because a lot of other sci-fi stuff has done stuff like that, but I don't know why. I really like it. It resonates with me. Can't really explain why.
Yeah, and I'm sure the listeners can tell by this point we're past all the stuff we don't like, and we're just over the moon about how cool the game is at this point. Which is a shame, because now there's another point where I'm like, what? Because they get there, and Nate goes like, wow, look at this. There's like a water fountain, and it's all like still working and stuff. That's super cool. And he drinks some of it, and he goes, wow, the water's clean. This is amazing. And then there's an eclipse, and they're like, oh, that's weird. There's an eclipse. And then Sully gets shot, and you're like, what? And he just dies in Nate's arms. And then Nate is like, Talbot shot him. I gotta go chase Talbot. And then he's again having this weird fever dream where all the people that he's fighting have like weird, creepy genie heads, and they're like shifting around all like kind of teleporty and shit. And it's just like nothing makes sense, and everything is suddenly really hard.
That section was bullshit.
Oh my god.
So difficult.
And
this is pretty much like, I consider this section like the final boss of the game, because we're going to talk about it, but there's not, like, the final boss of this game is not a boss fight. It's the more disappointing than Uncharted 1, in my opinion. Like, in terms of, like, how it ends. Like, it's not climactic at all. It's very anticlimactic.
And
I consider this like the final boss section, because it's a gauntlet of just running through some of the hardest enemies in the entire game.
And then you even have points where there's water and you're looking at it and you see your reflection, and your reflection like starts fighting you. It was very much like a Dark Link type time.
Yeah.
And it was really cool from a gameplay perspective. But as someone who's like trying to see this story as kind of grounded, can we stop with these weird like hallucination fever dream levels that just like don't really make a whole lot of sense? And
I don't mind those so much, but I do think games overdo them in general. Like, there's a lot of unless a game's kind of built around that, like Far Cry 3, for example, there's a bunch of those, but like there's a story reason for it. He has to go on these drug trips to ascend to the next level of almost enlightenment type of thing. But no, but I understand. Like, it was a weird thing because you don't really know what's happening. And then this is where it kind of all comes together, where Nate realizes that King Solomon cast the vessel that they're taught that Salim was talking about, and it contained hallucinogenic minerals to the well beneath Ubar, which affected the entire water supply, which is why the city just kind of disappears. Doesn't explain why the city got drowned out by sand.
Yeah, I guess it's just kind of one of those things where, like, if you're not having people constantly like upkeep with keeping the sand like out, a couple sandstorms later, and then like the whole place is just covered.
Maybe, but they said it. But the legend is that it was swallowed up in a night. That's what it is.
Interesting.
So, and he finds out that that's the reason why Queen Elizabeth sent Sir Francis Drake to get it, so she could have that hallucinogenic weapon. And Drake's like, "Nah, I'm not gonna do that," and just kind of covers the whole thing.
Right.
Up.
So he like kind of betrays the Queen's trust because he's like, no one should have this much like power. And the whole bit with Sully dying. So again,
Nate hallucinated it.
First time playing through it, I was like, kind of in disbelief. If they're gonna kill Sullivan, 3 games in, he's like a really well established, like super cool character.
I mean, it's not the first time they did it almost in the beginning of the first game anyway.
Like, it's fine if you want to kill off a character. Like, you know, I'm not going to be necessarily happy about it, but you can do it, and I'll respect your opinion for your choice to do that.
Yeah.
Right? But like the way that it was done was so quick. Like, he's dead, and then you're like, oh no, Sully, I better go run after the dude who did it. And it was like, I didn't feel like it had an impact.
There was no gravitas to it.
Right. So the whole time that I was running, I was like, he's not dead, right? Like, something weird happened because you had the eclipse, and now there's all these like genies and stuff, and like nothing really makes sense. And then you run into Sully, and he's like, hey, Nate, you took a drink of water and you were like nutso. So I'm glad I found you, but like, are you cool now? Because like clearly there's something in the water. And that's when he is talking to Nate about like what we were just saying, where
but even that, since you just came out of the fever pitch, like the fever dream, like, is this part of the hallucination? Like, I don't know what's really happening.
Right. And it was like, well, yeah. So Sully flicks you on the nose and he goes, is that real enough for you? So I was like, okay, all right, we're cool now. But that whole sequence, I was already kind of soured on it because of how difficult it was.
Mm-hmm.
But then, I don't know. It was one of those like kind of Scrubs moments where you're like, oh, what if this went differently and Sully just died? Ah, just kidding. That was just a hallucination. No big deal. And it was just, if they ever do kill Sully on screen in a game, I feel like this scene really cheapened it already. And I don't know. I just wasn't totally on board with that.
Well, the next part is Nate and Sully finds Marlowe, who's using a winch to recover the vessel.
Mm-hmm.
And from the the center waters of Aram, and Sully is nearly killed by Talbot, not killed this time, and Nate destroys the winch, which accidentally blows up the central cistern of Aram. In true Uncharted fashion, everything has to explode.
Classic Drake.
And so Marlowe and Talbot corner Nate and Sully, but the floor gives way, throwing Marlowe into a sinkhole. That's how she dies.
Mm-hmm.
And then taking Drake's ring with her. I forgot about
that
that. So
bitch.
he loses his ring to her, and as Ubar collapses, Nate and Sully fight Talbot, who is shot and falls into the sinkhole. And then Salim, the dude from before, rescues them, and that's the end of the game. And it just, the whole ending felt so anticlimactic because it's just quick time events to kill to fight Talbot. At least in Uncharted 4, it was a weird combination of like actual like quick time events that you actually had to literally time it with. It was almost like a rhythm versus just like, okay, when X comes up, hit X. Oh, when triangle comes up, hit triangle. I don't know. I just didn't like the final boss. The first time I played it, I got super mad because I defeated Talbot, and then there's these breaking pillars that you have to jump across, and I missed a jump and died and had to redo the whole fight over again. And that's a long fight. Like that takes a long time to do. And not because it's hard, it drags out forever. I honestly think sometimes there's been times where that fight has gone super fast for me and other times that it's gone super slow. So I honestly wonder if that fight is literally just a loading screen for the final cutscene.
Oh, interesting.
You know what I mean? Like, cause maybe my PS3 was like super hot, so it took a little bit longer to load, and that's why. But I've noticed like sometimes it'll be super fast, and other times it'll be super slow, and it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and like the whole deal with the city exploding and you having to, or I guess imploding, and you kind of having to like get out of the sand and jump from pillar to pillar, and it's cool, and I enjoy it as a climactic set piece just as much as I did with the Uncharted 2 getting out of Shambhala as that's exploding and stuff. Very much like the same beat. So it's like a little tired because like you've already done this,
and like other games have done it before. Halo, escaping the pillar of autumn,
and then so the boss fight. I feel like they took a big step forward from Uncharted 1, which was very similar to this, up to Uncharted 2, where you had the Lazarevich fight,
which is an actual boss fight,
right? And I don't know if that was based on the feedback they got from that. Or what, that they decided to kind of go back to more of a quick timey thing.
I don't know.
But that I can understand that is a design challenge to make a boss fight in this type of game where you don't want to have I'm almost thinking of like a Deus Ex 3 boss where you kind of have to hide behind something and shoot him a little bit until he gets up to you, and then hide behind something else and then shoot him a little bit, and I don't know if that's how you would want to end out your game, with something that's challenging but not really that fun kind of thing. And so I understand that would be something that they might want to shy away from. But kind of going back to the Uncharted 1 idea also doesn't really work.
Because that was just quick time. I would actually say Uncharted 1 felt better than this because you still kind of had to time your... you had a specific thing that you needed to do, but it was always the same thing. All right, you have to dodge to the next one at this time. All right, you have to dodge to the next one at this time. All right, you have to dodge to the next one at this time. This one is just all right, button pops up on the screen, you hit the button, and that's it. The other one felt more organic versus this one felt very forced in. I don't know. I just think for everything to kind of wrap this all up to with everything with Uncharted 3, it tried really hard in some aspects, and in other elements, but because it tried too hard in some aspects, I think it failed in others. I actually think they pushed the PS3 way, I don't want to say too far, but there's certain moments where it's we're saying there is some graphical issues, and not because the graphics are bad, but because there's literally tech issues where the graphics just don't render. So there's moments where I'm maybe you push the PS3 just a little bit too far with this one. But at the same time, then they figured it out for Last of Us, just the next game later. But so there's moments like that, and where I think they focus too much on the technical aspect and the set piece aspect specifically, the storylines really suffered. There's just so much of it where it's convoluted. And when you take a step back and really pay attention to it, you can see the through line, you can follow the thread, but it's very convoluted. And I think ultimately I would say this is a fun game. And we don't have a lot of time to talk about the multiplayer, but we played a lot of that multiplayer. Multiplayer is actually really good in this. Just like it was in Uncharted 2. The multiplayer was actually a ton of fun.
And when Josh says multiplayer, we didn't really play the competitive stuff. But like we played the shit out of the co-op stuff.
A lot of, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
It's legit a shitload of fun.
I would say literally my only complaint about the co-op is that it's balanced for 3 people. So if you play it with 2 people, it's like way hard.
It's so difficult.
So like we have to, it's, you know, we're pretty good at the game, and it's like a real challenge just playing on normal, which is fine. But you know, I would like to have a third person and then, you know, play it on hard
we
or something.
tried, but he just never turned the game on.
Every time we get somebody who has a PS3 and we're like, hey, you should get this game. And they're like, all right, I'll get the game. And then you're like, cool, well, you should play that. And then also play the co-op with us. And they're just like, nah.
They just
Like,
never do. It's so good. But anyway, so final thoughts on Uncharted 3. Like what?
There's
sorry. Go on.
one last scene after Salim saves him.
Mm-hmm.
You see them meet up with Elena, and she goes, "Hey, I'm sorry you lost your ring." And he grabs her hand and he said, "It's okay. I found another one." And it's his wedding ring, and it's like, "Aw."
That's really good.
So I guess they all worked things out and they're together again.
I mean, they are, because you see him in Uncharted 4.
Right. Yeah, it was it was one of those things where I guess it was like that was his last obsession, and he took care of it, and now he's like in a better place and he's ready to like focus on the relationship type thing.
Yeah.
And Sully, and like cool guy Sully moves, he's like, "Hey, our plane's over here. I'm flying you home because I'm a pilot, in case you forgot from the first game."
Oh yeah.
And you're like, like, cool, man.
Uncharted 3 really kind of set it up like that was the end of the series too, in a weird sense. But I'm really happy they did 4, because I actually think 4 is a better game than 3, personally. But no, so final thoughts. Like what are your final thoughts on Uncharted 3?
So if you had asked me that several years ago, I would have said it's definitely the worst of the trilogy.
I still think it is, personally.
I would say Uncharted 2, obviously the best one. Uncharted 1, second best. Uncharted 3 is like, gameplay-wise, it's probably better than Uncharted 1, but Uncharted 1 is like such a cohesive package that it's just like overall better.
I would agree with that. I think Uncharted 3 has better gameplay segments, but overall the gameplay is much more varied in a bad way. And varied gameplay is generally a good thing, but this is like it... Like I said, like between the camera angles and a bunch of other stuff, they kind of lose the thread with a lot of it. But I will say Uncharted 3 feels more cinematic because of those camera angles, which is really cool, but it took some hits in other places. But anyway, finish what you're saying.
So if you were to ask me now, if we're just ranking those first 3,
yeah,
still obviously Uncharted 2.
Definitely,
hands down. But then when it comes between 1 and 3... Looking back on it, once I have a full understanding of how the story's supposed to actually like pan out, it's like, I think I still like Uncharted 1 more. Because again,
it's much closer than it was, though.
Right, because I really like that cohesive story that you're all just like, you're on this island the whole game and like everything's kind of connected. Whereas Uncharted 3 is like very disjointed as you go from place to place, and it's like kind of tough to follow.
Games that do like travel destination hopping can be very confusing for like story. I mean, remember when we played Modern Warfare 2? Like we loved the first Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. Modern Warfare 2 just felt like you were just location hopping over. And in retrospect, after I replayed Modern Warfare 2, like it's still a good game, but it just like I should replay that. It's been a while since I've played that. That came out 10 years ago.
That's wild.
It's 10 years old. I think like either today or yesterday. I'm serious. Like it's like recently, like 10 years from the day of our recording.
But that's also like a perfect comparison. Like I could not have come up with a better comparison. Other than Modern Warfare 2 to Uncharted 3, where it's like really good game, awesome set pieces, like some of the best. I think that's the last Call of Duty game that I actually played, but it was like probably the best one that I had played up to that point, right?
Modern Warfare 2 you're talking about?
Yeah. But like the story, because I played it for the campaign, I didn't really play it for the multiplayer.
I was the same.
It's like there's all the information you need is there, but it's presented in such a way that it's kind of like really rushed at the beginning and you don't totally understand why everything is happening. And it's like not until you play it a couple times and you really focus on the story elements, which, let's be honest, in this type of game where it's like it's an action game, you want to get to the shooting, you might not be paying super close attention.
Yeah.
And it's like, you just like, let me shoot some shit. Like, let me get into it. And then you miss all that. And then like the whole game is just kind of a weird rush of stuff that's happening that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And
Uncharted 3 is a lot like that.
Yeah,
it's a lot like that. A lot of great elements, a lot of great gameplay stuff in it, but the storyline, it almost feels like it's not even like it's an afterthought. It's just the way it was presented was an afterthought. They're like, we have this great idea for a story. Oh wait, how do we tell that again?
Right.
So that's I would agree with that. Sorry, finish.
So yeah, I guess my rankings would still be
2, 1,
3, but 1 and 3 are like almost even at this point.
Yeah.
Especially with like the remakes for PS4, because like a lot of the polish that Uncharted 3 had to like the gunplay has been carried over to 1, because you don't have to like use the 6-axis to like throw your grenades, and like the weapon control makes more sense. So that kind of like quality of life changes have happened. So it's like it's a lot closer now.
I would say for me it's also 2, 1, 3 if we're going by the original trilogy. I will say that I think 1 and 3 are farther apart for me than they are for you. Mm-hmm. I think the issues I have with the mechanics, like this time, made me dislike it a lot more than I remember. I still like it. Like, it's not like I actually kind of want to keep on playing because I want to get to those spots. But then when you talk about like the Jin segment, and then even like the sandstorm in the town segment, I'm just like, that was a tough portion for me to get through too. Like, there was just a lot of moments in that game where there's like, I loved certain aspects of it, and I remember very specific moments in the game, some of the puzzles and whatnot. But then I remember the very next mission after that is like this bullshit thing, and I'm just like, I don't want to do that again. So overall, I'm with you. It's 2, 1, 3. I'm with you on that. So, all right. Well, that wraps up this episode of Still Loading. I'm surprised. This is another 2-hour episode for the show. I actually will have two episodes in a row. Next week's episode is going to be another long one. You'll like that one as well, as I hope you like this one. So Tristan, thank you very much for joining me.
My pleasure.
I don't believe you ever have social media stuff you want to shout out, but I'll always ask just in case you change your mind on it. So anything?
Nope, I got nothing.
As usual, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. If you want to reach out to me, you can also contact me at stillloadingcontact@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show and you like what I do and you want to see me to continue to grow this show and to be able to do more things, check out my Patreon, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. Even just $1 a month will help me get towards goals that I can expand on the show, maybe hopefully go to a weekly show at some point, maybe far off, maybe video content, though that's doubtful, but you never know. I'm still coming up with ideas for like different stretch goals. But just check it out, and you can check out the network. I'm a part of the Podbeard Network. You can go to podbeardnetwork.com and check out all the stuff there. So I think that should be it. So Tristan, once again, thank you very much, sir.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
And I will see you all next time.